Hello, I'm Lori Smith, the Professional Standards Manager with Pacific West Association of Realtors. I'm here today with Ed Zorn, the Vice President and General Counsel for CRMLS. Thank you for coming here today. Appreciate your time.
Happy to be here.
I've asked you here today to talk about the new MLS Rule 12.8.1, the Neighborhood Market Report. There's been some confusion on that, and can you give us an idea of the thinking behind that rule?
Sure. It was a rule that was actually passed at CAR last spring, and it came from really the issue of IDX. So we all know under IDX from an electronic element that our general rule under Rule 12.8 is you're not allowed to advertise someone else's listing. However, there's an exception for that when you have an IDX feed and it's published on the internet. And one of the important aspects of that was listing attribution. We want to make sure that the individual who is the listing agent and listing office are known to the members of the public. And so the feeling was that if we can do this on the computer, why can't we do it on paper and kind of in the old school farming system and on a flyer? And so the rule was implemented to address that issue. So now with the new rule, we have some similar requirements as we did for the IDX, and that is predominantly listing attribution. So we now do allow you to place active and pending and backup statuses onto a neighborhood market report. So the biggest impact on the rule for the neighborhood market report is that it's really going to now mimic the IDX rule. And what that means is you have to give listing attribution on the flyer to any active, backup, or pending listings. There are really two ways that people are doing that, and one would be to place the name of the listing agent and their office directly next to the active listing on your report. I've seen other agents who actually put little numbers at the end of those listings. Maybe if you have more than 6 or 7 listings, it would make more sense to put a 1, 2, or 3 next to each of the active listings. And at the bottom, you put a little legend with those same numbers, again, attributing with the listing agent and listing office's name. And that might keep the flow of your report looking a little bit more tailored. The thing to remember about listing attribution is you really want to make sure that the type is in that font size is at least the median of any of the font sizes within the report itself. One of the other important aspects of this rule is we want to make sure that it's a neighborhood market report and doesn't look like an advertising item so that some member of the public doesn't assume that the properties that are listed on that report are actually your own personal listings. So we always want to make sure we're portraying that true picture out to the members of the public and to the community. So for that reason, you're not allowed to use photographs of any of the listings in the neighborhood market report, because then it would look too much like an advertising flyer. The thing to remember too is if you get your hands on a report that you think violates these rules, you can always send a copy of that report to compliance at crmls.org, and our compliance department will actually take a look at that and determine if that flyer or report complies with the rules.
And also the agent or the broker has the option of opting out of allowing that kind of advertising?
They do, just like IDX, again, on a broker level, so the entire office has an option to opt out of having their listings be used within these neighborhood market reports. What an office would do is to send a request to legal at crmls.org with their request to be opted out of their listings appearing in other agents' neighborhood market reports. Now, just like IDX, what that means is your agents will also not be allowed to publish their own neighborhood market reports using any other active listings from other agents. So you're either all in or all out. Okay. There is also, on a listing by listing basis, from written instruction from the seller, an opportunity to also opt that particular listing out of a neighborhood market report. And you'll find that in the Add Edit module where you'd be able to make that selection to turn off the opportunity for those listings to appear in neighborhood market reports.
Okay. Thank you for that update.
Sure.
I know there's been some confusion on that, so thank you.
Sure.
Another issue that comes up quite frequently is agents don't know quite what to do if the seller asks them not to put their property on the market for a time period, and how that might affect days on market.
Sure, and this is a very typical thing we see sometimes where sellers don't want their property to go on to the multiple listing service right at the beginning of a listing. And if that's the case, we have a rule that states that any listing needs to be put into the multiple listing service within 2 business days of either that listing beginning or it being signed, whichever date is later. So if you're not going to be able to place that listing into the multiple listing service, the proper process would then be to file a waiver form. And that is, CAR has a form, and that is the SELM form. And you can send that directly to compliance@crmls.org, and then we have a log and keep track of those forms. And those forms normally have a period of time. And so what happens is, when that SELM period expires, then your responsibility under the rules to place that listing into the MLS comes back to life, if you will. Okay. And there's sometimes some confusion on how do the days on market get calculated when a subscriber goes in and then places that listing into the multiple listing service. The days on market, remember, is days on market, not days on MLS. So the marketing period for that property begins at the beginning of the listing period or the day you signed that listing agreement, whichever is first. So when you're doing your input of your listing into our system, we expect that you put the date that the listing agreement was either signed or began into the start list date box. And then the days on market are calculated from that date. So even if it was off of the MLS for 2 weeks or a month, those dates and that time period where that property was marketed but not in the MLS will be counted on days on market. So it's really important for you to educate your sellers to be aware of the fact that by keeping the property off of the MLS, the days on market are still going to be running.
And where can our members find out some more information about the rules?
Yeah, you can go directly to CRMLS.org, and we have a full knowledge base there which would include information about the rules, and they could actually download the rules and regulations and the citation policy directly from there.
Great. Thank you very much.
Sure.